Hello students, welcome to Learner's Planet. Let us start our biology class, and the topic to be discussed is fundamental unit of life, the same as we have started in the previous sessions. In the previous session of fundamental unit of life, we have discussed that how the cell behaves as a structural and functional unit of life, and thus it is said to be a fundamental unit here. Further, we have concluded that all the organisms, they are made up of cells, but these cells, they vary individual to individual. Different organisms, they are made up of different type of cells. Same organism, it contains different types of cells. Now, such type of properties or the differences are generally on the basis of its number, that is the number of the cells. Then it is on the basis of the size of the cell as well as the shape. Besides this, now in today's session, let us introduce another term, another property which provides difference between the various kind of organisms, and that term is prokaryotic and eukaryotic organisms. You must have studied earlier about these two terms, prokaryotic and eukaryotic. These are basically giving us the basic structural difference, the degree of complexity of cell, the degree of complexity with respect to function. So, the another variation which is caused among different organisms is on the basis of this karyotic nature. You know what this word karyotic means? This karyo term here, the karyo, it is actually coming from the word, it is actually resembling to the word nucleus. So, pro, it means primitive, and eu, it means true. So, basically these organisms, they vary on the basis of its complexity with respect to the nucleus. If nucleus is developed, then it would be known as eukaryotic. If it is primitive or it is undeveloped or it is very less developed, then it would be known as prokaryotic. Now this is what we are going to study about in this entire session. So let us start with the point that which organisms contains a developed type of eukaryotic cells. So generally, all multicellular organisms, they are made up of eukaryotic cells. So you can think of certain examples in our surrounding. You yourself is an example of multicellular organisms. We have already discussed in detail about these multicellular organisms. So in short, all these multicellular, they are comprised of eukaryotic cells exclusively. There is no multicellular organism which is going to have a prokaryotic type of cell. Besides, all unicellular organisms, they are either made up of prokaryotic cells or they are made up of eukaryotic cells. So, there are different categories among the unicellular organisms on the basis of its structure of nucleus, on the basis of complexity of its nucleus. If the prokaryotic cell is forming a unicellular organism, then the nucleus is going to be undeveloped. Example could be like we can say bacteria. If it is developed within the unicellular organism, you can think of an example like we can say as if it is your amoeba or it is your paramecium, and so many examples are there. So in the beginning of the session, let us understand that what these prokaryotic and eukaryotic organisms and the cells means, what are its characteristics, and where do they exactly they are found. So as we have already said, all multicellular organisms, they are eukaryotic, but unicellular can be either prokaryotic or eukaryotic. Now further, let us study in detail about these prokaryotes. So, let us begin it with the meaning of this particular term. Prokaryotes, it is comprised of two parts. What are they? You can see here, if you split it, there are two sections in this word itself. That is pro and karyotes. So pro means primitive and karyon means nucleus. So basically those cells which contain primitive or undeveloped type of nucleus, then it is known as prokaryotic cells. Can you think of it now? What do we mean by primitive type of nucleus? Now that should be a question which must come in your mind. So basically this primitive or undeveloped type of nucleus means that they are present in a particular region. They do not have a membrane in its surrounding. Usually when we study the structure of cell, we say that there is a centrally located nucleus with a clear-cut membrane in its surrounding, which is separating the cytoplasm and the nuclear material. But in the case of prokaryotes, no such membrane is found. In such cells, the nuclear material is found in a particular region and is consist of chromatin material, or we can call it as a chromosome. So those chromosomes are definitely present, but they are not separated from the cytoplasm. So such type of nucleus in which nuclear membrane and other things are absent and it is only comprised of chromosomes in a particular region, such a region is known as nucleoid. So this nucleoid, it is exactly, or it is having the same function as that of nucleus in higher organisms or in the eukaryotic cells, but we are not calling it as a nucleus. Rather, it is known as nucleoid, which is actually a region. Which region? In which the chromosomes are located. And of course, these are functionally active. They have the same function. You know what is the function of nucleus or the chromosomes? It is the storage of information. Which information? Which is related to the functions of the cells. Whatever function or whatever protein or things are produced, that information is basically contained in the chromosomes in the form of genes. And these genes are chemically made up of DNA. So all these information are present over there. So same storage as it is seen in the case of eukaryotic cells, that is present here in the nucleoid itself. Further, the transmittance or inheritance. So the another function of nucleus is inheritance of these units from one generation to the another. So even that is performed by the nucleoid region or the chromosomes in the prokaryotic cells. So we can say, or we can summarize the point here, that this nucleus or this region which is performing a similar function that of nucleus in eukaryotes is present in the prokaryotic cells in the form of nucleoid. And this nucleoid could be defined as the primitive form of nucleus. Now, the organisms which are comprised of such type of cells, that is prokaryotic cells, they are known as prokaryotic organisms. So, always remember, when you have to define the prokaryotic organism, then the words have to be shifted from somewhere or in a different way. If we are calling it a cell, then you have to define it as a cell which contains primitive or undeveloped type of nucleus. While when you are defining a prokaryotic organism, then those organisms which contain the primitive type of nucleus or the prokaryotic cells are termed as prokaryotic organisms. Can you think of several examples now? Exactly. We have quoted just a little before, that is bacteria. So this bacteria, they are having the different type of parts of its cells, and you can see here this specific chromosome. We are defining a prokaryote by concentrating on its nuclear material. So we are going to start this with the nuclear part only. So here you can see this entangled mass, a thread-like structure here, which is entangled, which is like in a fuzzy manner. So this type of material is basically a DNA. And the region in which it is present, That region is known as nucleoid region. Now this DNA, it contains all the information which is required for the different structural and functional properties of a cell. They all are stored in the DNA itself. And during the cell division, this information would be transmitted to the next generation. Further, these are actually having a plasma membrane. This plasma membrane is covered by two layers further. Which two layers are present above this layer? Capsule and cell wall. So in all, there are three layers which are surrounding this particular cell, cellular material: plasma membrane, cell wall and capsule. Now in this bacteria or in these unicellular organisms, this plasma membrane towards the inner side, that is towards the cytoplasm, it is actually it is in the form of invaginations, or we can say it is folded towards inside at some regions, and these regions are known as mesosomes. Besides, there is the presence of cytoplasm, ribosomes, bacterial flagellum. All these are present here. Ribosomes, these are meant for the protein synthesis. Cytoplasm, it is a jelly-like matrix present within the cavity of the cell. The bacterial flagellum, it helps in the locomotion of this particular organism. Now, you must have heard about different parts earlier. In the previous class, that is standard 8, you have already studied about the basic structure of the cell. So do you remember which parts or which organelles are missing here? Of course, we have only highlighted ribosomes here, right? We have not shown the organelles like, we can say, endoplasmic reticulum. Where is it in this diagram? Where is the Golgi apparatus? You remember these names? They are absent here. So in short, we can say there are various organelles which are also missing in the case of prokaryotic cells. So now is the time to understand these basic characteristics of prokaryotic cells. Besides its nuclear part, we have just defined the organism on the basis of its structure or complexity of the nucleus. Now let us study about the various other characteristics of these prokaryotes, prokaryotic cells, or you can say the organisms. So the very first property of these prokaryotic cells is that the nuclear material is not separated from the cytoplasm due to the absence of nuclear membrane. You understand what we mean by this particular sentence here? Nuclear material is definitely present. As we have said, it is in the region called nucleoid. What is this nuclear material? DNA. You can call it chromosome or the genes. But they are actually mixed with the cytoplasm only also. So this cytoplasm, it is actually jelly-like structure which we have observed in the diagram just now. So why is it possible? How this nuclear material is getting mixed with the cytoplasm? What is that thing which is not separating the two things here? That is the nucleus and the cytoplasm. So it is actually because of the absence of nuclear membrane. This is the important characteristic of the prokaryotic cells, that strictly the nuclear membrane is absent. Now imagine one thing. If the nuclear membrane is absent, then don't you think the nucleoplasm is also going to get mixed up with the cytoplasm? You must be knowing about this new word nucleoplasm. We have already given light over this point in the previous class. So you must understand this point here. The matrix which is present, the jelly-like substance which is present inside the nucleus, is not able to get separated from the cytoplasm. They are getting intermixed. So there is no demarcation between the cytoplasm and the nucleoplasm. And hence the entire region, entire matrix of such cell is known as simply cytoplasm. Further, in the case of prokaryotic cells, only a single chromosome is present. What do you mean by single chromosome? You must have studied that in human beings there are 46 chromosomes, or we can say there are 23 pairs of chromosomes in human beings. That means in the higher organisms, the number of chromosomes is always more than 1. We have just given here one example. Drosophila. It contains 4 chromosomes, 4 pairs. There are so many different organisms in which the number of chromosomes is going to vary. So another difference between the prokaryotic cell and the eukaryotic cell is with respect to the chromosome. In prokaryotes, these are unicellular organisms and they contain only a single chromosome. The entire information regarding the structural and functional properties of the cell, it is encoded by a single chromosome. All genes are located on a single chromosome only. So this is another important characteristic. Next important characteristic is that the membrane bound organelles are always absent in the prokaryotic cells. So what you mean by this point now? First of all, just remember, just memorize one thing again. What you mean by organelles? We have studied about this particular point. What is the definition of this organelle? What does this particular thing means here? So organelles, these are the small sections of the cell which are performing various functions. Organelles, within the cell there are some small compartments and these compartments are actually known as the organelles. Now these organelles, they may be separated from the cytoplasm by the membrane or they may not be bound by membrane. So in the case of prokaryotic cells, membrane bound organelles are absent. Can you think of several examples of membrane bound organelles and membrane-less organelles? Let us give some examples here. Ribosomes. What type of organelle it is? It is membrane-less. So it is not bound with the membrane and is actually present here in the prokaryotic cells. Let us say endoplasmic reticulum. Now endoplasmic reticulum, it is membrane bound organelle. So it is absent in the case of prokaryotic organisms. Nucleus. Even this is a membrane bound organelle. But in the case of prokaryotes, this nuclear material is present or this region is present but the membrane is absent. It is not present as a membrane bound organelle. Rather it is membrane-less. So this is, we can conclude here that whatever organelle is present is going to be membrane-less. Whatever membrane bound is there, it is strictly absent. But if similar membrane bound is present, then it is supposed to be in the modified form, as in the case of nuclear material. It is present as a nucleoid and it is a membrane-less organelle. But nucleus, it is membrane bound. So that nucleus is an organelle which is present in the eukaryotic organism and nucleoid is thereby found in the prokaryotic organism. Now, can you think here at this point that if these membrane bound organelles are absent, then how those particular functions are performed by the prokaryotic cells? To sustain life, these organisms or these cells, they need to perform all the required functions. Let us say respiration. How this respiration is going to take place? Which is the site of respiration? Mitochondria. Fine. But mitochondria is a membrane bound organelle. Then that is absent in the case of prokaryotes. Now, how do they respire? If they don't respire, then how do they survive? So, there are alternatives which are found in such type of cases. The function of mitochondria that is being performed by the membrane itself. We have said in these prokaryotic cells, we have seen that there are some invaginations found here. These membranes, plasma membrane is invaginating in the form of some folds and those are known as mesosomes. So in this case, this mesosome is performing cellular respiration. Similarly, all those particular functions are actually performed by different type of organelles in this particular prokaryotic organism. And hence, they are able to survive as a developed organism. Now the next type is eukaryotes. Again, we can say that there are two parts in the word eukaryotes. These are eu and karyotes. What you mean by eu and the karyotes? We have already suggested the term eu, it means true. The word karyon, it means nucleus. So, the cells which contain a well-developed type of nucleus. They are known as eukaryotic cells. Now what you mean by this well-developed nucleus? Since beginning we are saying this point, we are discussing it thoroughly. So here it means that a complete demarcated boundary is separating the nuclear material from the cytoplasm, and such body, such organelle, which is a membrane-bound organelle and containing a nuclear material within inside its cavity, is known as nucleus. So any cell which contains such a typical nucleus with a nuclear boundary or the membrane is known as eukaryotic cells. And the organisms which are made up of such type of eukaryotic cells, they are known as eukaryotic organisms. So in the beginning, we said that these eukaryotic organisms, they can be unicellular or they can be multicellular. What do you mean by unicellular and multicellular? Unicellular, let us give a reminder of that definition. A single cell which is capable of performing all the life-sustaining functions, they are known as unicellular organisms. So these unicellular, they can be either prokaryotic or eukaryotic. We have studied about the prokaryotics till now, and now is the time for understanding the word eukaryotic organisms. Let us give an example, that is amoeba. There are so many other examples of such eukaryotic unicellular organisms. Now these eukaryotic unicellular organisms, they are actually forming entire kingdom, entire group of organisms, and that definitely you are going to study in the further chapters. But for your information, we can say that all the unicellular eukaryotic organisms, they comes under the group or the kingdom known as Protista. That is, this particular kingdom is actually known as Protista. So all eukaryotic unicellular, they are going to come under this particular group or the kingdom. Now, can you think of certain other examples also? Like besides amoeba, it could be paramecium, euglena, diatoms, certain type of algae, and so on. The list is of course endless. So let us understand this amoeba here. Now amoeba, we all have studied about it so well till now. In this, let us start with the part nucleus. You can see this centrally located nucleus here. Now this particular nucleus here, it is containing the nuclear material inside. Now this nuclear material, it is present in the form of entangled mass inside. Entangled mass of what? Thread. It appears like thread. It is not a thread, it is a living thing, living body. So these are actually the DNA which are present inside this particular nucleus. And this outer boundary or this line is actually known as nuclear membrane. So you can see here the nuclear material is not getting mixed up with the cytoplasm present in the surrounding. This green background, we are highlighting it as a cytoplasm. Otherwise, it will appear as some dot-like structures when you observe it under the microscope. So these two things are not getting mixed up here. And thus we are calling it as a true type of nucleus, which is an independent organelle, independent membrane-bound organelle. And this DNA is actually coding the various information of various kind of proteins and other things. Besides, there are the other parts here now. They are cell membrane, which is highly flexible in case of amoeba. And since it is highly flexible, therefore, it is able to change its shape. It is having an irregular shape. Irregular as well as it is changeable. It can change it according to the surrounding conditions. Now these extensions, the finger-like projections present here, they are called as pseudopods. What do you mean by pseudopods? The word pseudo means false. Pods means feet. So they are having these false feet so as to perform various kinds of functions here, like engulfing the food material, or you can say it helps in the locomotion of these organisms. Further, cytoplasm. It is a jelly-like matrix present inside the cavity of this membrane of the cell. Further, we can say there are another structure called vacuole. Now these vacuoles, there are different kinds, and they actually help in there are different kind of vacuoles. Like they can help in the digestion of the food material, excretion of the food material, or we can say the contractile molecule or vacuole, which help in the excretion of water and waste from the amoeba. So there are several kind of things and functions here, and of course different kind of organelles present inside. Now this is about unicellular. Can you think of multicellular? Example of multicellular organism could be plants. It could be human beings, dogs. Many more examples would be found. Now in this diagram we have shown a structure of leaf here. There are different parts, but please don't get confused with the organism, multicellular organism and the leaf. Now, this particular picture is a diagram of an organ. It is a part of a living organism. Plant is an organism. Leaf, it is an organ. It is a major site of photosynthesis. These things are they should be very clear in your mind. When we are discussing about the multicellular organisms, then we can say that the organism is an entire body design, entire body which is functioning in coordination with different parts of its own body, and thus they are able to survive in its surrounding. Also, they are made up of different cells. The cells, they will constitute the tissue are going to form the organ, or then organ system. Then organ system will further coordinate and they will comprise the entire organism. So the diagram shown here is of organ level, but it is multicellular because it is made up of so many cells. Now let us understand the basic characteristics of these eukaryotes, the eukaryotic cells or the eukaryotic organisms. So first point to be understood is that the nuclear material is separated. Separated from what? Separated from the cytoplasm. Now, as we have studied in the case of eukaryotes, what was there? Nuclear material was present, but it was not separated from the cytoplasm. Why so? Because the nuclear membrane or the boundary was absent over there. So eukaryotes, they essentially possess a boundary which separates the nucleus from the cytoplasm, and that boundary is known as nuclear membrane. This nuclear membrane is a double membrane structure, and the details we will further study while studying the entire structure of the nucleus. Besides this point, in nucleus it is also having the nucleoplasm. The cytoplasm has been just separated from it. So this organelle that is nucleus, even it requires a jelly-like substance inside, in which the nuclear material could be present. So what that material would be known as? It is nucleoplasm. So and the cytoplasm and nucleoplasm will together form the living substance of the cell. In the case of prokaryotes, what is the entire living substance? It is cytoplasm. But in eukaryotes, it is comprised of cytoplasm as well as nucleoplasm. And the combination of these two is known as protoplasm. Next point is that these eukaryotic cells, they contain the membrane-bound organelles. What you mean by membrane-bound? The organelles which contain the cell membrane. Examples: endoplasmic reticulum, like Golgi apparatus, nucleus, the mitochondria, chloroplast. So many organelles are present within the cell, and these organelles, they are the structural compartments in which the specific functions are taking place. Like endoplasmic reticulum, protein and lipid synthesis occurs. Mitochondria, it is a site of cellular respiration. Then chloroplast, it is a site of photosynthesis. So this way, in case of such cells, there is a complete division of labor observed. A clear-cut distribution of work is observed. Whereas similar functions in the prokaryotes, they were performed by the cellular membrane or the outer boundary itself. And of course, it is very much different from the functions of eukaryotes. So eukaryotes, they function as a developed cell now. Besides this particular thing, these eukaryotes, they contain more than single number of chromosomes. If it is a unicellular organism, then definitely they contain a single chromosome. But if it is a multicellular, then the number of chromosomes are more than single. Can you think of reason now? The reason is that as the complexity increases, the functions also becomes complex. And for such complex system, the complete information has to be stored properly. And thus, they are encoded by more than single number of chromosomes. How many chromosomes are present in the human being? There are 23 pairs. So all this is about the prokaryotes and the eukaryotes. Now you can understand so clearly that the living organisms, although they all are made up of cells, but how much they are different from each other. All these cells within the body or in the different individual organisms, they are very much different from each other in terms of size, shape and its numbers. Besides that, on the basis of its complexity nature, complexity with respect to its nuclear material, complexity with respect to its organelles, and so on. But still, there are certain characteristics which are common in all the cells. That is, all the cells are actually made up of cell membrane or the plasma membrane, nucleus and cytoplasm. These three things would be similar in all types of cells, whether it is prokaryotic or eukaryotic, unicellular or multicellular. Each cell will contain these three parts for sure. But definitely, structure-wise or complexity-wise, there would be, function-wise, there would be certain differences. The intensity of particular function will vary. So all this we are going to study in the next session. Till then, goodbye. Thank you so much. Have a nice day.